Seven's great.
Okay.
Eight's great, nine's
just
great.
in reply, Phil.
If I could just make one point. The existence of this working party does not preclude other workshops that bring other people in. And I can imagine times in the next 6 months where we have aspects that we need to work through that are going to need to be socialised much more widely.
Thank you very much. I think that's a really important point. Well, look, just to test the water, I'll move the amendment that I've suggested, that the committee be made up of 7-7.
Second.
And the 7 people are the people that we have nominated. Seconder from Councillor Casey. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary?
No.
Carried. Do you want your opposition?
No, we're being a mothership again. So
Right. Thank you. Shall we now come back to, and thank you very much, Peter, for your patience in waiting for this item to come up. 12. Okay, there's a slight constitutional problem here. Kathy, you moved the original motion, so I've got to get somebody else to second it.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Alf. Yep. So I don't think I need to put that again. We now come to item number 12. Now, a working party was set up to consider this, but the working party has been unable to reach agreement. So at that point, we still have the original recommendations before us because they have not been amended by the working party. So what I'm going to suggest is that we hear from both sides of the argument on this, of members on both sides of the working party, and then there'll be a discussion by council around the provision. But so that we have a recommendation on the paper, if I move pro forma the recommendation that went to the committee of the whole, if I got a second for that, seconded Penny Hulse, and then we'll have something on the table to debate. So I'm now taking calls on this issue. Or actually, do you want to have, maybe we should ask for questions first. Are there any questions of officials on this matter?
Mr Mayor, can I...
Councillor Hulse.
Thank you. I wonder before questions, it may be worth, because this has been quite a complex issue, maybe if we just ask Richard to give a very, very quick and to the point summary of where we've got to might be useful, and I'm happy to speak to that, as I'm sure...
That's a very good suggestion. Richard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The Green Fleet is a not-for-profit organisation who fund, plant and maintain Indigenous planting in order to offset carbon emissions. And their work is funded by companies and individuals who pay to offset carbon emissions. So in order to secure funding, they need to provide a guarantee to companies and individuals who are providing that funding that carbon sequestration will be achieved. And the carbon sequestration rate, which comes through those trees once they mature, that those benefits or the carbon increases come as the tree ages. The benefits to council in this program is that it's a partnership with Green Fleet that would fund the revegetation and the maintenance of those trees and would accelerate the work that we're already doing in revegetation programs in regional parks. So just to give you an idea of the context, over 500 hectares of regional park land has been identified in the Regional Parks Management Plan for revegetation, and we currently plant around 8 hectares per annum. So we've got a lot of area that's available for planting. In addition, there's benefits in increasing the amount of carbon offsets that come through that planting and involving Green Fleet's donors in those planting and maintenance activities. So there's some voluntary input that comes from that and some community engagement as well. The Council considered the application from Green Fleet first in November 2015, and at that point the committee resolved to negotiate a partnership to carry out the planting on regional parks as a pilot. We reported this back to the Environment and Community Committee to seek an amendment to one of those conditions in the original resolution, as the original resolution did not contemplate an encumbrance, which is become the only real mechanism that we have to be able to secure those benefits, the rights in the carbon. The committee supported in principle, as has been identified, entering into agreement with Greenfleet, subject to Working Party considering the acceptable alternatives to an encumbrance, and entering into an agreement if no suitable alternatives were found. So that, as has been identified, that committee met this morning, and further details were provided as to the alternatives that have been considered, or the mechanisms that have been considered, and that there was no alternate mechanism available. So the specific encumbrance protects the trees from being cut down for a minimum of 50 years to protect the carbon. And so we've been careful in the negotiation of the agreement to restrict that encumbrance solely to the protection of those carbon rights. So it's not, for example, a disposal, as it doesn't confer any rights of sale or occupation. There's no restrictions on how council uses that land apart from keeping it in permanent forest. But in terms of recreation, putting trails through it, that sort of things, there's no restrictions on that. So it's a bit like a covenant. A covenant can't be applied in this situation, as they can only be applicable in favour of an adjacent landowner and not in gross. And Greenfleet have agreed to revert to a covenant if the ability to be able to use a covenant was made available later on. So at the moment the legislation doesn't allow that. And I guess also that this, while it's a pilot, it does provide a framework for other organisations to enter into similar arrangements with council for carbon offsets and for assisting in that revegetation program. I'm happy to take any questions, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Richard. We'll now take questions. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Hollier. You mentioned that in the original resolutions passed by the Parks Committee, Park Recreation and Sports Committee in November 2015, the conditions did not, they referred to no encumbrance, and this is the problem that Greenfleet have with that, those original conditions. I just want to point out the original conditions did not refer to encumbrance. What the original conditions referred to, and what Greenfleet finds objectionable, is the condition no property rights beyond assuring the maintenance of the planting for 50 years are assigned.
Excuse me, Councillor.
Is that
Yeah,
the
that's what I
offending
want.
clause?
The question.
Sorry, I missed the question.
Yeah. The difficulty when we have a lead up to the question. Can you just put the question, Mike, so it's clear?
You said
Yeah.
that the clause referred to no encumbrance. It said no property rights, and that's the one they want to rescind, is it not? They want to rescind that clause.
Okay, that's the question.
Okay. My understanding and the legal advice is that an encumbrance is not a property right per se, but maybe that we could call on Crystalline.
But leave that argument aside. So why do they want to rescind the clause that specifically doesn't mention an encumbrance? It says no property rights beyond assuring the maintenance of the planting for 50 years are assigned. That was the original deal. Why can't they live with that? They do want a property right, in other words, don't they?
No, they want to protect the carbon from being disposed of. That's
But they want to
protect,
rescind that clause about no property rights. Let's be honest about it. It's important.
Sorry, we're restricting this session to questions. So I wanted to check. I've got two other people on my list. Councillor Hulse.
I don't have a specific.
Sorry, you're reserving for a debate?
My only question is, I was just making myself some notes, so I stuck to a clear question. So my question is, the issue of what the encumbrance is on. Is this encumbrance on the land, or is this encumbrance on the carbon as sequestered by the trees?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the protection is on the carbon sequestered through the trees, not on the land. Well, I guess the trees are attached to the land, but
So am I clear in thinking that this still allows the land to be sold, still allows the land to be leased, still allows the land to be, should it be required to be available to the government for Treaty of Waitangi settlements? Is it still available for us to use for concession activities? Is it still available for the full use of a regional park? And does it still, the land underneath these trees, still retain their absolute use as always envisaged as a regional park?
through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Got a few questions. I understand that this is the proposition on the table. Have we sought anything along these lines from New Zealand organisations, something that's indigenous rather than coming out of Australia?
This, through you, Mr. Chair, this is the first proposal of this type that we've had. I'm certainly aware of one other organisation that has approached council. They haven't approached regional parks directly, and I'm not sure where that one is or the details of it. But this is one that, as I say, organisation that approached council last year.
So have we actively sought interest within New Zealand from organisations that are involved in this area?
No, we haven't. We've just responded to an application from
Okay.
a specific organisation.
Okay, so let's be quite clear on this. We're responding to an application that's from somebody else, and we haven't sought anything from within New Zealand. Where are the carbon credits going?
There's no, the credits aren't going, what we're doing here is we're protecting the carbon so that there's no credits being sold or anything like this. So what Greenfleet are undertaking to the people who are funding the offsets is that they will protect the carbon. The carbon will be sequestered in those trees won't be cut down or disposed of during that 50-year period.
Sure, I understand that, but having said that, my understanding is that Greenfleet are effectively an intermediary, and various companies are paying for the planning. I'm assuming that they're going to be using that as an offset to activities that they might be involved with. It could be an airline that's burning fossil fuels, whatever. That's my understanding. Would that be correct?
The companies and individuals can offset their carbon, and a number of airlines, rental car companies, other organisations offer people who are hiring cars or going on flights to offset carbon, and you can pay an extra amount on your fare. That amount would then be passed on to Greenfleet to fund the planting and the maintenance of those trees.
Sure. So I guess my question around that is, have we looked at the ethics around that? And I would suggest there are ethical considerations where you're effectively sanctifying the burning of carbon because somebody can offset it by doing good. So I just have a concern around that, and have we applied ourselves to that issue? Because there are very real concerns around the planet as to where these offsets are going and what they're effectively sanctifying.
I'm not sure whether that's a political question, but what I'd have to say...
I'm just asking whether we've
Yeah.
looked into it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question, but I was thinking, Councillor, on the question of ethics. Carbon offsets through sequestration are practiced all around the place, and we don't generally challenge the ethics of that. We want to see a reduction in carbon use, but we also accept that it is an acceptable thing for a country or a company to do to offset their carbon use through planting of trees, and we'd want to encourage that. But maybe you could answer the first part of the question.
So, sorry, I've lost the
Yeah,
first
you
part of
lost
the
the
question.
question. Do you want to repeat the first part,
We're all
Councillor?
losing the plot, don't worry.
Okay, so the context is that there are issues around where offsets are going, because there are very dubious practices around this, around the globe. So I have a concern as to where those offsets are going. For example, you could have the offsets going to some airline that's burning fossil fuels, and we could have some issues around that. They could be going to a company that's involved in rather dubious practices in mining or the like.
So through you, Mr Chair, I think the benefit of an organisation like Greenfleet is they're a not-for-profit group, and so they offer some integrity to the process, and where they can enter into agreement with us, like with an organisation like council, where we can put them into an area of permanent forest on parkland that's not likely to be disturbed, or the trees not likely to be cut down, then that provides a very credible solution to some of the issues that have been raised.